What if two ordinary-looking coins from different countries are hiding details that most people would never think to check? A British 10 pence and an Australian 10 cents may seem like simple pocket change, but their history, designs, and unusual varieties can make them fascinating finds for collectors. Welcome back to Change Your Life. Today's countdown brings together 4 coins from the United Kingdom and Australia. 2001 UK 10 pence, no mint mark. 1982 Australian 10 cents, no mint mark. 2006 UK 10 pence, no mint mark. 1980 Australian 10 cents, no mint mark. These coins feature distinctive designs, including the Crowned Lion Passant Guardant on the British 10 pence and the iconic lyrebird design on the Australian 10-cent coin. Struck in cupro-nickel, they were made for everyday circulation and were handled by millions of people. But here's where things get interesting. Collectors don't just look at the date. They examine minting errors, unusual varieties, striking details, condition, and other small characteristics that can separate an ordinary coin from a truly collectible example. So before you drop an old 10p or Australian 10-cent coin back into your change, take a closer look. The final coin in today's countdown has a detail that could make you see everyday pocket change very differently. Now, let's uncover coin number 1. Some coins are collected because they are ancient. Others are remembered because they are connected to an important moment in history. But then, there are coins that spend years hiding in plain sight, looking completely ordinary, until someone finally decides to examine them properly. The 2001 United Kingdom 10 pence is one of those coins. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than an everyday British circulation coin. A familiar silver-colored surface, a royal portrait, a traditional British symbol on the reverse, and a date that most people would probably never think twice about. But place that same coin beneath a bright light. Rotate it slowly, and the story begins to change. The 2001 10 pence belongs to Britain's decimal coinage and was produced for circulation by the Royal Mint. One detail that often confuses newer collectors is the absence of a mint mark. If your 2001 British 10 pence has no mint mark, that is normal. It does not automatically indicate a missing mint mark error or make the coin rare. Understanding what is normal is one of the first lessons in serious coin collecting. Now look at the obverse. The coin carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, making it instantly recognizable as a British decimal coin from the period. Turn it over, and the reverse reveals one of the most distinctive designs associated with the denomination. The Crowned Lion Passant Guardant. The crowned lion stands proudly across the reverse, surrounded by the inscriptions identifying the denomination and country. It may look like a simple image, but it connects an ordinary pocket coin to Britain's long tradition of heraldic symbolism. The coin itself is made from cupro-nickel, giving it that familiar pale metallic appearance. When freshly struck, the surface would have looked considerably brighter than many examples you'll find today. Because circulation changes coins, a coin can spend years inside pockets, pass through cash registers, move between banks, sit inside purses, and eventually disappear into an old jar or drawer. Every journey leaves something behind. A heavily circulated 2001 10 pence may have a dull surface. Fine scratches can cross the fields. Small contact marks may appear around the portrait. The highest points of the crowned lion can gradually lose their sharp definition, and the original brightness can disappear almost completely. To someone who isn't a collector, it simply looks worn out. But a collector sees an opportunity to investigate. The first step is simple. Check the date. Then examine the lettering. Look at the rim. Study the portrait. And finally, turn the coin over and inspect the crowned lion carefully. Collectors may search for genuine mint-made characteristics such as double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized varieties. But there's an important warning. A coin looking unusual doesn't automatically mean it is valuable. A scratch caused by circulation isn't necessarily a mint error. A dent isn't automatically a rare variety. And a dirty or heavily worn surface doesn't prove that a coin is worth a fortune. The key question is always, did the unusual feature happen at the mint? That distinction separates genuine numismatic discoveries from ordinary damage. For most circulated 2001 UK 10 pence coins, the coin remains a normal circulation piece rather than an automatic rarity. Greater collector interest can come from authenticated mint errors, recognized varieties, or exceptionally preserved examples. And that's what makes searching old British change so fascinating. You're not expecting every coin to be valuable. You're learning to recognize the one detail that deserves another look. Because sometimes, the most interesting coin isn't the one that looks rare. It's the one that looks completely ordinary. Until you know exactly where to look. And the next part takes this investigation even deeper, because we'll examine the production story, circulation journey, and the specific details collectors should inspect before deciding whether a 2001 10 pence deserves a place in a collection. The journey of a 2001 10 pence doesn't end when it leaves the Royal Mint. In many ways, that's when its real history begins. Imagine a freshly struck coin entering circulation in Britain. Its surfaces are bright. The lettering is sharp. The crown lion is clearly defined. The rim is clean. At that moment, it looks almost completely different from the worn examples collectors discover today. Then the coin begins moving. One transaction becomes another. A shop counter becomes a pocket. A pocket becomes a purse. A purse becomes a cash register. Years pass. And the coin slowly records every part of that journey. That's why a heavily circulated 2001 UK 10 pence can look so different from a well-preserved example of the same issue. The cupro-nickel surface can become dull. Tiny scratches accumulate across the open fields. Contact marks appear around the portrait. The highest parts of the crown lion gradually become less defined. Even the rim can show evidence of years of handling. But collectors know that we're tells only one part of the story. The next question is whether the coin contains something unusual that originated during production. That's where careful inspection becomes important. Start with the date. 2001. Then check the lettering for unusual shapes or apparent doubling. Examine the rim for irregularities. Look carefully at the portrait. Then turn the coin over. Study the crown, the lion, the lettering, and the surrounding fields. Collectors can search for genuine double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized mint-made varieties. But every unusual feature needs context. A scratch running through the lion doesn't automatically mean the die was damaged. A flattened area doesn't automatically indicate a striking problem. And a strange color doesn't prove that the coin is rare. Sometimes what looks fascinating under poor lighting turns out to be ordinary circulation damage. That's why experienced collectors compare the entire coin rather than focusing on one dramatic mark. Professional authentication becomes especially useful when a potentially significant mint error or variety is discovered. It can help determine whether the characteristic is genuinely mint-made or simply the result of decades of handling. Condition also matters. Two 2001 10 pence coins can share exactly the same date and design, yet one can have considerably stronger collector appeal because its surfaces and details are better preserved. A heavily circulated example generally won't receive the same attention as an exceptionally well-preserved coin. So if your 2001 10 pence looks dirty, scratched, or heavily worn, don't clean it. Aggressive cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce collector appeal. Instead, keep the coin as you found it. Handle it carefully. Use good lighting. and inspect it without altering the surface. That's one of the most important habits a new collector can develop. And remember, most circulated 2001 UK 10 pence coins are ordinary circulation pieces. Their value doesn't suddenly become extraordinary simply because they are old. The interesting possibilities are usually connected to authenticated mint errors, recognized varieties, or unusually strong condition. And that brings us to the real lesson of this first coin. The purpose of checking your change isn't to believe that every old coin is a hidden fortune. It's to learn how to identify the difference between an ordinary coin, a damaged coin, and a genuinely unusual coin. The 2001 10 pence may have started life as an everyday piece of British pocket change. But after years of circulation, it has become something else too. A small historical record of Britain's decimal currency. And once you understand how to examine one, you're ready for the next coin. Because our second coin leaves Britain behind and takes us to Australia, where the reverse design changes completely and a remarkable native bird takes center stage. Now the journey leaves Britain behind and crosses the world to Australia. The denomination is familiar, 10 cents. But almost everything else about the coin tells a completely different story. The 1982 Australian 10 cents may look like an ordinary, worn piece of pocket change today. Perhaps the surface is dull. Perhaps the edges are marked. Perhaps decades of circulation have left scratches across the coin. But underneath that tired appearance is a small piece of Australia's decimal coin history. And the first thing that makes this coin immediately recognizable is the reverse. Instead of Britain's crowned lion, Australia features one of its most distinctive native birds, the lyrebird. The bird appears prominently on the reverse, creating a design that is completely different from the British 10 pence we just examined. It isn't simply a denomination. It's a celebration of Australian wildlife placed directly into everyday currency. The 1982 Australian 10 cents was produced for Australia's decimal circulation system and, like the other Australian 10-cent coins of this era, uses a cupro-nickel composition. That composition gives the coin its familiar silvery appearance and provides the durability needed for a coin designed to survive everyday use. And these coins certainly traveled. They moved through pockets, cash registers, wallets, shops, banks, and family coin jars. Some were spent hundreds of times. Others were eventually forgotten. That's why an example discovered today can look dramatically different from the coin that originally left the mint. A heavily circulated 1982 Australian 10 cents may have lost much of its original brightness. The lyrebird's finer details can become softer. The field may contain numerous tiny scratches. The rim can show contact marks. And years of exposure can leave the entire surface looking dark or tired. To someone who doesn't collect coins, it might appear almost worthless. But collectors don't stop at appearance. They begin an investigation. First, the 1982 date. Then the lettering, the rim, the obverse portrait, and finally, the lyrebird on the reverse. They examine the details beneath good lighting and magnification, looking for anything that appears inconsistent with normal circulation. One important point is the mint mark. A normal Australian 10-cent coin from this period does not need a visible mint mark to be considered genuine. So if your 1982 example has no mint mark, that alone does not make it a rare error. The real question is whether the coin contains a characteristic created during the minting process. Collectors may search for double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized mint-made varieties. But once again, not every unusual mark is an error. A scratch can happen decades after the coin was struck. A dent can come from circulation. A damaged edge can occur after the coin leaves the mint. And a dark or dirty surface doesn't automatically indicate rarity. The strongest discoveries are based on evidence. That's why serious collectors carefully distinguish mint-made characteristics from post-mint damage. For most heavily circulated 1982 Australian 10 cents, the coin remains a normal collectible example rather than an automatic fortune. Greater collector interest can come from authenticated mint errors, recognized varieties, or exceptionally well-preserved examples. And that's what makes this little Australian coin worth checking. Not because every 1982 example is rare, but because the habit of examining ordinary coins is how collectors eventually learn to recognize genuinely unusual ones. So if one of these old Australian 10-cent coins appears in your collection, don't immediately dismiss it. Look at the date. Study the lyrebird. Inspect the lettering. Check the rim. And examine the surfaces under good light. Because sometimes, the difference between an ordinary coin and an interesting discovery is nothing more than one tiny detail that most people never noticed. The fascinating thing about an old Australian 10-cent coin isn't simply how long it has survived. It's what happened to it during those years. When the 1982 Australian 10 cents was first struck, its cupro-nickel surface was much brighter, and its design details were considerably sharper. The lyrebird stood out clearly on the reverse. The lettering was crisp. The rim was well defined. And the coin was ready for another journey through Australia's economy. But circulation has a way of transforming even the strongest-looking coin. One transaction becomes hundreds. Hundreds become thousands. The coin gets placed beside other coins, dropped onto counters, carried inside pockets, and exposed to everyday handling. Eventually, the bright surface begins disappearing. Small marks accumulate. The fields become less reflective. The finer details of the lyrebird gradually soften. And on a heavily circulated example, the entire coin can develop the worn appearance that many collectors recognize immediately. But here's where careful collectors think differently. Where isn't the same thing as rarity. A worn coin isn't automatically valuable. A dirty coin isn't automatically rare. And a damaged coin isn't automatically a mint error. Instead, collectors search for characteristics that can be traced back to the production process. They carefully inspect the 1982 date, the lettering, the rim, the obverse portrait. Then, they turn the coin over and study the lyrebird. They look for unusual doubling, unexpected die marks, die cracks, die chips, struck through areas, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized mint-made characteristics. But identification requires caution. A scratch created when the coin was in circulation can sometimes look dramatic under magnification. A damaged edge may appear irregular. A stain can make part of the design look unusual. None of these automatically proves a mint error. The key is understanding how the feature was created. That's why authentication becomes important when a coin appears genuinely unusual. A professional examination can help distinguish a legitimate mint-made variety from damage that occurred after the coin entered circulation. And there is another factor collectors always consider: condition. Imagine two 1982 Australian 10 cents coins sitting next to each other. Both have the same date. Both have the same basic design. Both are made from cupro-nickel. But one has spent decades loose in circulation. Its surface is scratched. Its details are worn. Sometimes a coin doesn't need to be ancient to become interesting. It only needs to survive long enough for people to start wondering about its story. The 2006 United Kingdom 10 pence is a perfect example. At first glance, it looks almost exactly like the kind of coin you might find at the bottom of a purse or mixed inside an old jar of change. Silver-colored, worn, perhaps scratched, maybe even dirty from years of circulation. But turn it beneath a bright light, and the familiar British design begins telling a much older story. The 2006 10 pence was part of Britain's decimal circulation coinage and was produced by the Royal Mint. Like the normal UK 10 pence coins from this period, it does not require a visible mint mark. So if your 2006 example has no mint mark, that alone isn't evidence of a rare missing mark error. That's an important distinction for anyone searching through British change. The obverse carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. And when you turn the coin over, the famous Crowned Lion Passant Guardant appears again. The Crowned Lion walks proudly across the reverse, connecting this everyday denomination with Britain's centuries-old tradition of heraldic imagery. It's a striking contrast. The coin was designed to be used casually, yet the symbol on it represents a much deeper history. The 2006 10 pence is made from cupro-nickel, giving it the familiar pale metallic appearance of modern British circulation coinage. When new, the coin would have had much sharper details and brighter surfaces. But the example you find today may tell a very different story. Perhaps it spent years in circulation. Perhaps it passed through hundreds of hands. Maybe it sat inside a cash register for years before disappearing into someone's collection. Every journey leaves evidence. The once bright surface can become dull. Fine scratches can cross the fields. Contact marks can appear around the portrait. The rim may show signs of repeated handling. And the highest details of the Crowned Lion can gradually become softer. A heavily circulated example may look almost completely ordinary. But collectors know better than to judge a coin from across the room. They bring it beneath strong lighting. They examine the 2006 date. They inspect the lettering. They study the rim. They check the portrait. Then they turn the coin over. The crown, the lion, the lettering, the surrounding fields. Every detail becomes part of the investigation. Collectors may search for genuine mint-made characteristics such as double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized varieties. But once again, something that looks unusual isn't automatically valuable. A scratch from circulation isn't necessarily a mint error. A dent doesn't automatically make the coin rare. And a dark, dirty surface doesn't prove that the coin has unusual value. The important question remains, was the feature created during the minting process? That distinction separates a genuine mint-made characteristic from damage that occurred years after the coin entered circulation. For most circulated 2006 UK 10 pence coins, the coin remains an ordinary circulation issue. Greater collector interest can come from authenticated mint errors, recognized varieties, or exceptionally preserved examples. And that's exactly why careful inspection matters. You aren't trying to convince yourself that every old 10 pence is valuable. You're trying to identify the unusual coin hiding among the ordinary ones. And the deeper story of the 2006 10 pence becomes even more interesting when we look at how circulation transformed these coins, and what collectors should actually examine before calling one rare. The moment a 2006 10 pence left the Royal Mint, it stopped being a new coin and became part of everyday British life. It could have passed through a supermarket checkout, dropped into a pocket, spent on a small purchase, returned as change, and then disappeared into a drawer for years. That's how ordinary circulation coins become historical objects. Every small mark can represent another stage of the coin's journey. On a heavily circulated 2006 UK 10 pence, the cupro-nickel surface may have lost much of its original brightness. The fields can show fine scratches. The rim may carry contact marks. The portrait can become softer around its highest points. And on the reverse, the details of the Crowned Lion Passant Guardant can gradually lose their crispness. But collectors don't confuse rare with rarity. That's one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. A worn coin isn't automatically valuable. A dirty coin isn't automatically rare. And an unusual-looking mark isn't automatically a mint error. Instead, collectors look for characteristics that can be connected to the actual minting process. Start with the date, 2006. Then inspect the lettering. Look carefully around the rim. Study the portrait, and turn the coin over. Examine the crown, the lion, the lettering, and the surrounding fields. Under magnification, collectors may search for double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized mint-made varieties. But there is a reason experienced collectors don't immediately call every strange mark an error. The coin may have spent years in circulation before reaching you. It could have been scratched by another coin, damaged by machinery, dropped onto a hard surface, or exposed to chemicals that changed its appearance. Those are post-mint alterations, not evidence that the Royal Mint produced a rare error. That's why authentication can become important when a potentially significant variety is discovered. A professional examination can help determine whether the feature is genuinely connected to the minting process. Condition is another major part of the investigation. A heavily circulated 2006 10 pence with scratches and worn details generally has much less collector appeal than an exceptionally well-preserved example. And that's why cleaning should be avoided. If you discover an old coin that looks dirty, don't polish it. Don't scrub it. Don't use chemicals to make it shiny. The original surface is part of the coin's history. Removing it can permanently change the coin and potentially reduce its collector appeal. For most circulated 2006 UK 10 pence coins, the coin remains an ordinary circulation piece. The year alone doesn't guarantee a huge value. Greater interest generally comes from authenticated mint errors, recognized varieties, or exceptional condition. And that brings us to something important about today's search. The goal isn't to promise that every old British 10 pence or Australian 10 cents is secretly worth a fortune. The real goal is to teach you how to inspect coins intelligently. Because once you understand the difference between age, condition, circulation damage, and genuine mint-made varieties, you start seeing pocket change differently. And now, we've examined two countries. We've looked at a 2001 British 10 pence and 1982 Australian 10 cents, and a 2006 British 10 pence. Only one coin remains. We're heading back to Australia, this time to 1980. And the final coin brings another chapter of Australian decimal coinage into the story. The 1980 Australian 10 cents is next, and its lyrebird reverse gives us one more reason to look closely before dismissing an old coin as ordinary. The final coin in today's search takes us back to Australia, to 1980. More than 4 decades have passed since this little coin entered circulation. And during those decades, it may have traveled through thousands of ordinary moments that nobody ever recorded. A shop counter, a pocket, a wallet, a cash register, an old family coin jar, maybe even a forgotten drawer that hasn't been opened in years. Today, the 1980 Australian 10 cents can look almost completely ordinary. Worn, dirty, scratched, heavily circulated. But that's exactly why it deserves a closer look. Like the 1982 Australian 10 cents we examined earlier, this coin belongs to Australia's cupro-nickel decimal coinage. Its silver-colored appearance comes from the durable metal composition, which was designed to withstand the demands of everyday circulation. And then, there's the reverse. The unmistakable lyrebird. Unlike the British 10 pence, which carries the Crowned Lion Passant Guardant, Australia's 10-cent coin celebrates a remarkable native bird. The lyrebird gives this small denomination a distinctly Australian identity. Look carefully at the design. The bird's body, its elaborate tail, the surrounding lettering, the denomination, the date. When the coin was new, these details would have been sharply defined. But after decades of circulation, time leaves its fingerprints. the bright surface can become dull. The fields can accumulate countless small scratches. The rim can develop contact marks. And the finest details of the lyrebird can gradually become softer. A heavily circulated 1980 example may look like nothing more than an old piece of change. But collectors don't judge a coin only by how worn it looks. They investigate. First, confirm the 1980 date. Then examine the lettering. Check the rim. Study the obverse portrait. And finally, turn the coin over and inspect the lyrebird carefully. One detail that can confuse new collectors is the absence of a mint mark. A normal Australian 10-cent coin from this period does not need a visible mint mark to be considered genuine. So a 1980 Australian 10 cents with no mint mark isn't automatically a rare missing mark error. Instead, collectors search for something more meaningful. A characteristic that may have originated during the actual minting process. Under magnification, they may look for double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized mint-made varieties. But once again, the difference between a genuine error and damage is critical. A scratch from circulation isn't automatically a mint error. A dent isn't proof of rarity. A damaged rim doesn't necessarily indicate a striking problem. And a dirty surface doesn't suddenly turn a common coin into a valuable one. The question is always, what caused the unusual feature? If the evidence points back to the minting process, the coin becomes much more interesting. If the feature happened decades later, it's simply damage. For most heavily circulated 1980 Australian 10 cents, the coin remains a normal collectible example. Greater collector interest can come from authenticated mint errors, recognized varieties, or unusually well-preserved pieces. And that makes this final coin a fitting end to today's search, because it reminds us that coin collecting isn't about looking at an old coin and immediately imagining a huge price tag. It's about observation, patience, history, and knowing what you're actually looking at. But there is still one final chapter to the 1980 Australian 10 cents. In Part 2, we'll examine its circulation journey, the details collectors should inspect, and the most important mistakes to avoid when you discover one in an old collection. A coin can survive for more than 40 years. Yet almost nobody remembers where it has been. That's what makes the 1980 Australian 10 cents so fascinating. When it first entered circulation, it was simply a new 10-cent coin. Bright, sharp, untouched. The lyrebird on the reverse would have been clearly defined, and the cupro-nickel surface would have had a much fresher appearance. Then the coin began moving through everyday life. It could have been used in shops, passed between customers, stored in cash registers, carried in pockets, and eventually placed inside a jar or drawer. Every journey left tiny marks. Today, a heavily circulated 1980 Australian 10 cents may have a dull surface covered with scratches and contact marks. The lyrebird may appear softer. The rim may show signs of repeated handling. And the original brightness may be almost completely gone. But those signs of circulation shouldn't be confused with rarity. That's one of the biggest mistakes new collectors make. Old doesn't automatically mean rare. Dirty doesn't automatically mean valuable. And damaged doesn't automatically mean mint error. Instead, experienced collectors look for evidence of something that happened before the coin ever reached the public. Start with the date. 1980. Check the lettering. Study the rim. Look carefully at the obverse. Then examine the lyrebird reverse under good lighting. Collectors may search for genuine characteristics such as double dies, die cracks, die chips, struck-through errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other recognized mint-made varieties. But identifying one requires patience. A post-mint scratch can sometimes look surprisingly dramatic. A damaged rim can appear unusual. A stain can make part of the design appear distorted. None of those things automatically makes the coin valuable. The important question is, can the unusual feature be connected to the minting process? If the answer can be supported by evidence, the coin may deserve further examination. If it is simply circulation damage, it's still a fascinating old coin, but not necessarily a valuable mint error. And if you discover a dirty 1980 Australian 10 cents, there's another important rule. Don't clean it. Don't polish the surface. Don't scrub away the discoloration. Don't use household chemicals to make it shine. Cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and potentially reduce collector appeal. Instead, preserve the coin exactly as you found it. Take clear photographs. Use good lighting. Compare the details with normal examples. And if you believe you discovered a genuine mint-made variety, consider professional authentication. For most circulated 1980 Australian 10 cents, the coin remains a normal collectible piece. The date alone doesn't guarantee an extraordinary value.